When Shaquille O'Neal walks into a place, nobody expects the person about to change the most lives in the room is wearing a plain hoodie and beat-up sneakers with no jewelry, no entourage, no announcement. That is exactly how he wanted it on a Tuesday evening in October when he pushed through the side entrance of Obsidian, the hottest nightclub in downtown Atlanta. The club with a 2-hour line wrapping around the corner of Peachtree and Baker. He was not at the front of that line. He had come in the way delivery drivers come in, quietly, with his head slightly down, carrying the kind of stillness that only people who have been very famous for a very long time learn how to carry. The first thing he noticed was a small scuff mark on the concrete wall near the baseboard, boot height, the kind a door makes when it is kicked open regularly rather than pushed. He noticed it, said nothing, kept walking. The second thing was a photograph mounted in a cheap plastic frame near the service corridor. An old woman seated in a wooden chair in front of a small house, hands folded, looking at the camera the way people used to look at cameras before cameras became something you carry in your pocket. No label beneath it. No reason for it to be there. Shaq looked at it for 2 seconds, filed it away, and kept moving. The third thing was a name. A woman's voice from a doorway past the coat check, saying the same name twice in a low, urgent way. Marcus. Marcus. The bass swallowed it before he could find the face. At the door to the main floor stood a man named Derek Scholes. Derek was 26 years old, 6'2", 230 pounds, wearing a black jacket with a gold earpiece cord down the side of his neck. 14 months at this door. He had been very good at it, which meant he had been very fast at sorting people into 2 categories: people who belonged inside and people who did not. He looked at the big man in the plain hoodie. He made his decision in 3 seconds. "Hey!" His arm went across the doorway. "This section is reserved." Shaq looked at the arm, looked at Derek, said nothing. "You can go back around to General," Derek said, the way you say something that is not a question. "I'm good," Shaq said. "Sir," Derek's voice dropped 1 register. "This is not your section." Shaq O'Neal, 4 NBA championships, a net worth past $400 million. The man whose name was on a bronze plaque 60 feet behind that wall, stepped back, nodded once, said absolutely nothing. Now here is the part that nobody in that building understood yet. Shaquille O'Neal had been carrying a specific piece of information for 11 months. What Derek Scholes had no idea about was one single fact that connected 3 people in that building in a way none of them had any reason to know. And trust me, you are not going to see this ending coming. Stay with us for the whole video, because what is about to happen at that door, and in the room beyond it, will permanently change 4 lives, including Derek Scholes's own. Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal was born on March 6, 1972, in Newark, New Jersey, a city still rearranging itself after the riots of 1967, still working out the long question of who it belonged to. His mother, Lucille O'Neal, was 20 years old. She was 5'2", with the kind of quiet that is not emptiness, but a very full container with a very tight lid. She made decisions about her children the way a good engineer makes decisions about load-bearing walls, carefully, understanding that everything built on top depends on getting the foundation right. She told her son one thing so consistently it stopped being advice and started being weather. Excellence is not a performance. It is a practice. He heard it in Newark. He heard it at LSU. He heard it in locker rooms in Orlando and Los Angeles and Miami. He heard it in the half-second before Derek Scholes put his arm across a doorway, and he heard it in the half-second after. His stepfather, Philip Harrison, was an Army sergeant. Straight back, rules posted, not because he was harsh, but because he understood that the absence of structure is not freedom. It is just unguided wait. Philip gave Shaq one instruction that ran alongside his mother's like a parallel road. Don't be a reaction. Be a response. Philip Harrison died in 2013. He was not in Obsidian that Tuesday, but that sentence was. It had been in every room Shaq walked into since 2013. It was in this one too. Shaq grew up in military housing across 3 states. Always the new kid. Always the biggest person in the room, which sounds like an advantage until you are 11 years old in a new school and realize it makes you the thing other people decide they need to test. He was tested. He responded. He found basketball the way some people find religion. Not by looking for it, but by walking into a gym one afternoon and understanding in the first 30 seconds that this was the correct language for whatever he had been trying to say. He went to LSU, drafted first overall in 1992, 4 championships, finals MVP 3 times, 14 all-star selections, a business portfolio, restaurants, real estate, car washes, a Krispy Kreme franchise that would make the basketball money look like a down payment. He built all of it on 2 sentences. Now, the man who put his arm across the doorway. Derek Scholes grew up in College Park, Georgia, 12 miles from downtown Atlanta, in a house with a chain-link fence and a mother who left for work before he was awake and came home after he was supposed to be asleep. He was not a cruel person. What he had decided, at 17, at 19, at 22, was that he wanted to own things. One specific thing, a neighborhood gym. Not big, the kind that stays open late, has hand-lettered signs on the walls, charges $20 a month so the people who need it most can actually get in. He had been saving since he was 19. He had a notebook with projected startup costs. He had researched 3 locations in southwest Atlanta. He was not a man without ambition. He was a man whose ambition had been running in place for 7 years, while the bills kept moving forward. 3 weeks before Tuesday, Derek had received a letter from his landlord. The building his mother had lived in for 18 years was being sold. She had 60 days. Derek had done the math the way people in that position always do. Lying in the dark, running numbers in a circle that always came back to the same place. He went to work that Tuesday carrying 60 days and a circle and a notebook he had not opened in 3 months. He put his arm across the doorway because the man in the hoodie did not look like someone who belonged in the reserved section. He made that call in 3 seconds. He had no idea who he was making it about. 3 minutes later, the main floor of Obsidian was doing what it always did at 10:15 on a Tuesday. Loud, bright, packed, moving. 300 people. Among them, in specific positions, were 4 people whose night was not going to end how they expected. The first was Beverly Scholes, 58 years old, Derek's mother. She was there because her friend Constance had purchased a birthday table 3 weeks earlier, before the letter arrived, and Beverly Scholes was the kind of woman who honored commitments even when the ground had shifted. She was wearing a navy dress and her good earrings, hands folded on the table, in exactly the same posture as the woman in the photograph on the corridor wall. The second was Marcus Webb, 22, bartending the VIP bar for 4 months while putting himself through Georgia State 1 semester at a time. 2nd year of a business degree. He was the one whose name had been called twice near the coat check, his manager telling him to move faster. Marcus had a habit of making eye contact with people, really making it, the kind that costs 30 seconds but buys something else. He was that kind of person. The third was Sandra Okafor, 64, retired after 31 years as a high school principal in DeKalb County. She was at Beverly's table watching the room the way principals watch rooms. Not suspiciously, just completely. She saw everything. She had been watching the service corridor entrance from the moment the large man stepped back from the arm across the doorway. The fourth was Gerald Humphreys, sitting alone near the back wall with a glass of water and his coat on, even though the room was warm. 61 years old. He had been Derek Scholz's father for the first 4 years of Derek's life, and then he had not been. 22 years of distance neither of them had ever mapped together. Gerald had come because he heard through a chain of people he barely knew anymore that his son worked here. He had come to look. He had not planned anything beyond looking. Within 4 minutes of reaching his reserved table, a server named Alondra appeared, did not know who the reservation was for, treated every table the same, was very good at her job. At the VIP bar, Marcus Webb looked toward table 7 and stopped moving for 2 seconds. He finished the drink he was making, set it down, looked again. Sandra Okafor had already placed the man at table 7 and was now watching Derek Scholz at the door, still sorting people, still carrying everything. 20 minutes passed. Then Marcus Webb walked out from behind the bar. Nothing in his job description covered this. He crossed the floor, stopped at table 7, and said quietly enough that the next table could not hear, "I know who you are, and I'm sorry for what happened at the door. That was wrong." A pause. "I don't have the authority to fix it, but I wanted you to know somebody saw it." He turned to go back. Shaq said, "What's your name?" "Marcus Webb." "Sit down for a minute, Marcus." At the door, Derek had recognized Shaquille O'Neal approximately 8 minutes after putting his arm up. The recognition moved across his face the way cold moves into a room when a window opens. First a change in the quality of the air, then something you cannot deny. He looked across the floor at table 7, and something moved behind his eyes that was not quite shame and not quite panic, but lived uncomfortably close to both. He did not leave his post. But before you hear what happened next, you need to feel the full weight of what was in that room. A man turned away from a door he owned. A bartender who left his post to say somebody saw it. A retired principal with her hands flat and still on a table, which was what she did when she was deciding something. A woman in a navy dress who did not know her son was the one who had put his arm across the doorway. A man near the back wall with his coat on, watching a son who did not know he was there. Nobody moved. The music was enormous. Then Shaq picked up his phone. One call. 45 seconds. Phone face down on the table. "Tell me about Georgia State." What Marcus did not know, what none of them knew, was that Shaquille O'Neal had purchased Obsidian 11 months earlier. Not the event space, the building. 42% of the parent company, the parking structure, 2 other properties on the block. Finalized quietly through an LLC whose name meant nothing on a deed. His management company had sent a routine update 4 months ago, noting a new head of door security, local hire named Scholz, strong references. The connection had not come to him at the door. It came at the table, slowly, phone in hand, scrolling a directory. Derek Scholz, head of door security. Then, Beverly Scholz, Unit 4C, 18 years, one of 3 residential units above the club, 60-day notice pending. He sat with that for a moment. The 45-second call was to his property manager. 4 sentences. Find the file on the residential units. Find the one under Scholz. Take her off 60-day notice. She's staying. Then he asked Marcus about Georgia State. He did not summon Derek. He did not make him walk across the floor and stand there while the room watched. He did what a quiet man does with power when he has decided not to perform it. Derek would find out the next morning at 8:45 when his mother called saying his name twice, the way she said it when something had happened. What else Shaq had done was talk to Marcus for 9 minutes, then ask to see his notebook. Marcus kept a small notebook behind the bar, ideas for a business he had not yet started. He handed it over. Shaq read 3 pages, asked 2 questions. wrote a name and number on a card and slid it across. "Call her Monday morning. Tell her I said to take the call." His chief investment officer. "She's going to want to talk to you. Don't be nervous. Be prepared." Sandra Okafor watched all of it from 11 feet away. Then she stood, crossed the floor, stopped at table 7. "I watched you do that. I wanted to say thank you." "For what?" he said. "For not making it something it didn't have to be." He nodded. "You know anyone at that birthday table?" "Beverly Scholes, 18 years at that address. Good woman." Something shifted in his face. Not surprise, more the look of a man watching a shape he already understood become more fully itself. Now here is the thing nobody in that room knew. Gerald Humphreys, in his chair near the back wall, was not just Derek's absent father. He was the man connected to the photograph in the corridor, not as its subject, but as its donor. The old woman in the wooden chair was his mother, Estelle Humphreys, Derek's grandmother, who died in 2019. Estelle had lived in a room above that building for 11 years in the 1960s. When Obsidian opened 3 years ago, Gerald had given that photograph to the original owners because he wanted something of hers to remain in the place. He did not know the building would be sold. He did not know the buyer would be Shaquille O'Neal. He did not know his son would end up working the door. He had come to look at his son from a distance. Instead, he had watched his son turn away the man who owned the building, and then watched that man make a quiet phone call and slide a card across a table without once calling his son over to stand in the room and feel what he had earned. Gerald sat there a long time after Shaq left. He thought about his mother in the wooden chair. He thought about a sentence she used to say, "You cannot give what you were never given, but you can decide to be the place where the giving starts." He thought about a 26-year-old at a door doing the math in the dark, the same way Gerald had once done it a long time ago, before the distance became the distance. He took out his phone, looked at it for 60 seconds, then typed, for the first time in 4 years, to a number he had never deleted. "I'm here if you want to talk." Philip Harrison had said it as a rule. Shaq had lived it as a practice. Gerald was not a young man, but he was not finished. Beverly Scholes drove home that night not knowing her apartment was no longer under threat. She would find out in the morning. She would read the email twice, sit at her kitchen table, then call her son and say his name twice, and when he answered say, "Baby, I need you to tell me about Tuesday night." A bartender who handed a stranger his notebook and was told to call someone named Priya on Monday morning. A retired principal who crossed a room to say thank you for a quiet thing, which is the harder thank you because it requires you to have been paying attention. A man near a back wall who typed 8 words and waited. A woman in a navy dress who went home to an apartment she was allowed to keep and did not yet know it. A young man at a door who made a 3-second decision and would spend a long time learning what he had made it about. And one sentence, in a voice gone since 2013, present in every room he entered. Don't be a reaction, be a response. He never had to be told twice, and neither should you. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from. If this story reminded you of someone who chose grace when they had every right not to, hit that like button. That kind of choice deserves to be seen. Subscribe and join this community. We tell stories about what people do with power when nobody is watching. The next story is already waiting. We will see you there. Paste your script.